From the ongoing trade war to skyrocketing grocery and housing prices, the cost of living is top of mind for many across the country. And Nik Nanos is here to break down the numbers. He's the founder and chief data scientist at Nanos Research. Nick, how are you, sir?
Good, Roger. How you doing?
I can't complain for a Saturday morning, but always some concerns, though, especially now looking at the future. People are not too excited about it.
Yeah, the thing is we've been tracking for quite a long time. Simple question. We ask Canadians whether they think that the next generation will have a lower, higher, or the same standard of living. In the latest tracking that we just released in the last day or so, about 6 out of every 10 Canadians believe that the next generation will have a lower standard of living. The kicker, Roger, is that if you ask Canadians that are under 35 years of age, that number jumps from 6 out of every 10 to 7 out of every 10, which means young people are much more pessimistic than middle-aged and older people when it comes to the future.
And are they saying why?
Well, I think a lot of this has to do with young people, and this also bears out in the same research. They're worried about housing, and they're worried just generally about the cost of living.
And so it's a tough time for a lot of people, and they're worried that it's just going to keep going down.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is housing's been top of mind for the last couple years, and the rising cost of housing. And in the same survey that we did, we asked Canadians how worried they were about paying for housing in the next 30 days, right? Whether it's a mortgage or rent or whatever it is. And about 1 out of every 5 Canadians, and that's a lot of people, are worried or somewhat worried about the paying for housing in the next 30 days. Now, maybe the good news is that level of worry, 20%, is lower than November 2023, which was when we had some higher interest rates and stuff like that, where 1 out of every 3 Canadians were worried about housing. But you know what? Whether it's 20%, 30%, it's still a significant number. So it's kind of like, walking down the street in your neighborhood, 1 out of every 5 of your neighbors are worried about whether they're going to be able to pay the rent or pay the mortgage in the next 30 days.
That is something to think about as you're walking down that street, isn't it? Holy cow.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's talk about inflation now. It's not the biggest problem compared to the last few years. Surprising about that?
Well, you can say it's not the biggest problem. We ask Canadians about the rising cost of living and whether they've had to cancel purchases, whether they've had difficulty in paying for necessities and stuff like that, or whether inflation hasn't been a problem. So maybe the good news is 56% of Canadians, it's a majority, a slim majority, say, hey, inflation, not a problem at all. But, one way to look at it is, 1 out of every 4 Canadians say that they've had to cancel major purchases or that they've had difficulty paying for necessities, and then another 19% say both. So, still a pretty big chunk of Canadians, 4 out of every 10, are reporting that they are getting squeezed by inflation. And, kind of like the numbers on housing and the future, young people are much more likely to report that they're canceling purchases and also struggling to pay for basic necessities.
And we're still, I'm just looking at some of those numbers from 2022, and we're still up from that, I think. Or we're almost about the same. I'm just trying to do some quick math there. People who are worried about all of the above and things like that. Exactly.
Maybe the worst point, I think, was at the tail end of December 2024, where, the people that said that it wasn't a problem, that was only 4 out of every 10 compared to 56% now. But, the fact of the matter is we talk about a pandemic. Well, we have an epidemic now, and it's called inflation, and people worrying about just paying for basic necessities and paying for housing. And young people are on the front line bearing the brunt of these worries.
Okay. Nick, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Take it easy.
Nik Nanos is the founder and chief data scientist at Nanos Research.